We'd like to thank today's episode sponsor, Total Pharmacy. Join us for our conference tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Hey, Pharmacy Podcast listeners, this is TWIRx, This Week in Pharmacy. I'm excited today. Every time we get to have people in the studio, it makes it at least 10% better, depending on who it is. If it's someone like Sean Nairn, then it's a party. We're going to tone it down today, though, because we're talking about serious stuff in the world of pharmacy business and pharmacy technology. That's where I started my career in pharmacy a long time ago. I'm getting old when I can say 20 years ago and actually remember things with great clarity, Bob. I'm excited about today, and I have two guests, Bob Bates, Craig McEwen with Red Cell Technologies. Welcome to This Week in Pharmacy.
Thanks for having us.
Hey,
We're excited.
Thanks, Todd.
Excited to be down here and talk with you both. And before we started recording, just for people that are listening that might not be watching us per se in the studio, there is a history here of understanding technology and where it's going and where it was. But when you start piecing it together from someone who remembers character-based systems and what that meant to efficiency and workflow, that's kind of what we're going to get into today. But before we do, Craig, you have an interesting story I'd like you to share with our listeners about how you got into this industry and kind of your legacy of where you started and where we are today with Red Cell Technologies.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I guess the listeners can decide whether it's interesting or not, but we'll give it a go. First of all, I guess the part of the story, and very appropriate chatting with you, is it's a Pittsburgh story. So Pittsburgh, born and bred in Pittsburgh, and most of my career, and I just like you, well over 20 years in healthcare technology, close to 30 years now in healthcare technology. Started out in cardiology, radiology, and that's another discussion, but another great Pittsburgh company called MedRad.
Yeah.
And then moved into the pharmacy space when we took a Pittsburgh-based startup that got purchased by McKesson, a company in Pittsburgh, was really called Automated Healthcare, and was the pharmacy automation business for McKesson. And that was really how I entered the pharmacy space. And we looked at that business and felt that there was an opportunity to really over-invest and innovate in that space, and things bringing software to automation, bringing IV robotics and IV workflow to health systems, which was still is one of the most dangerous pieces of pharmacy. And that was a great business, and I think taught me a lot about the value of finding a great market and having the courage to invest. And after we sold, we branded that company Ascent. After we sold Ascent to Omnicell, I was the co-founder of a specialty pharmacy technology business called TWIRx, which built out the software and the processes and capabilities to help health systems enter the specialty pharmacy market. And that's great, still a great business.
Trellis is still out there, right?
Yeah, we sold Trellis to CPS a couple of years ago, and then we have been looking at the retail pharmacy space for a lot of years. I've got a particular passion for the independent pharmacies. Coming from Pittsburgh, it's hard not to have a passion.
The underdog.
To have a passion for the underdog. But it's a space that we felt is really important to patients and my family and friends, but also felt that it was a space that hasn't been adequately invested in. And so we can talk about this as we get further, but Red Cell, a core tenet of our being is over investing for innovation, and we'll talk a lot about Axis. Axis is one of the outputs of that vision, which is the truly first cloud-based pharmacy management system. Definitely long-term care, and I'd argue the first real one in the country.
It's incredible. That's kind of what I want to get in on. But before doing so, Bob, it's amazing to have you here, and a veteran in the industry, working alongside Tammy Devine at one time. I loved working with her back in the QS1 days when we'd drive down to, was it South Carolina?
Yeah, Spartanburg.
Yeah, South Carolina. Spartanburg. So now it's like the next gen QS1 platform to kind of continue evolving. But share with listeners about yourself and how you got here.
Oh man, years of technology, and in healthcare probably about 11 or 12, and certainly pharmacy is just an offshoot of that. It's and an important one, right? It's critical to the business, but technology enhancements. That's actually how Craig and I hooked up, was replatforming and re-energizing businesses and reinvesting in them is like core to what I do. So usually brought in when they need a new system to drive growth, and that's far more fun than turning stuff down or optimizing and things like that. So when we got started on a journey, I was actually on a golf course, and Craig and I had worked together before, and we had built a new platform there as well that was cloud-based. And he said, "Hey, look, we're over in pharmacy. We have these old systems, and the whole industry is full of them, and we want to take it to the next level, and we want to build a new one. Do you want to take this on?" And I said, "Well, first of all, working for Craig, he invests in the business. FP does as well. And the opportunity to do that and work on this team. I mean, if you haven't seen the rest of the team that Craig's put together, it's pretty amazing. So we have a good time, and we get to make a difference when you get to work with your customers and they say, wow, it's easy to use this system. And we'll talk about that later with Access. But one of the core premises that we put into it was not just cloud-based and ease of operating, but ease of use. When you can go up there and use that, and you can fill a prescription. And Craig's got a pretty good story about somebody he brought into his office when we built this system. When you can go in and do that, and we actually had it happen at our booth. We were at the we basically were at a trade show just recently, and we had a pharmacist come in, and he was filling prescriptions within like 5 minutes. He's going, "Don't do it, let me do it." And I'm like, usually that takes a week, a month, sometimes up to 6 months to use these systems. And we built this system with a intuitive background. So that's my background, just bringing new systems to the market, and specifically healthcare and pharmacy.
Now understanding what happens to an operation, what happens to workflow, what happens to ease of use of a pharmacy software system, where you start giving the user freedoms. And I remember the world of competing with character-based systems. I had no idea about pharmacy software in 2004, but I did understand workflow. I understood workflow because my background in telecommunications was 100% about workflow, getting the data passed through a frame relay network before the internet, that you had to get that data passed securely through firewall technology and as quickly as possible. That kind of like poured into my career at SoftWriters with being the very first SQL-based system. Right?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about a revolutionary program that literally reinvented workflow. And guess what that was called? Integra's DocuTrack system.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you empowered me, and Louis Foster and I were a killer sales group, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because I'd come in with this revolutionary platform that we just sold 3 months ago and we're implementing, and it was a hard system to implement at the time, because back then we didn't have anybody that was consulting long-term care pharmacies. They really had to go through training and kind of figure it out themselves. But then when I put Louis on my team, who really understood more about workflow and how to manage paper and how to manage digitizing of paper, that revolution, that was the next level up.
Yeah.
And so then about that time, I kind of, I left SoftWriters and watched Integra just explode with workflow technology. That's part of your legacy and your story today, because if you think of this, we think character, SQL, workflow, aka Integra, DocuTrack, delivery track, and now I know there's something between that, probably something else before Access, but now we're going to the cloud. So there's another level of information management, information access, information dissemination, and I can't wait to talk to you, Craig. And I know I'm jumping the gun, but I want to talk about the rise of the consultant pharmacist too, and how this kind of plays into where this is all going. But I'm going to slow down because I get too excited. Kind of
You're getting me excited.
Give us a kind of take us from the Integra world, right? Where you guys started like realizing they had something special. How did this start to piece together? Because Craig, I know you, and I know that you see, just like I see, and I see podcasting and audio development of education. I'm looking at it 5 years from now. You see things from a software user base and in consultancy and what that means for the industry.
Yeah. So I'd say, the technology expert in the room's Bob. I think of things. I study markets, and to me, we've got roadmaps for pharmacy because a lot of industries have moved to the cloud, and we're we're owned by a private equity firm, Francisco Partners, who's a wonderful owner because they understand the value of investing in software. That's why I've worked with them for 12 years. And I've seen and helped them move businesses to the cloud in multiple industries. And so to me, it wasn't a question of should we. Of course we should. It's a little bit of a question of how and the different pieces. And so for us, the interim step, we acquired QS1, wonderful, rich history. There were a couple gems in the QS1 portfolio that a lot of people forgot about. Integra, being a one, and also the pharmacy switch.
Yep.
And we then acquired Pioneer RX, which in my opinion is, as we sit here today, the best pharmacy management system in the country by far. Clearly is placing more pharmacy systems and has more pharmacy systems than anybody. But a lot of that's because of the vision of Jeff Key and that team of having the passion for workflow.
Yep.
So you can do everything in workflow there. And if you obsess about it, you can make it magical. And I think one of the things on our journey we looked at and said, this is wonderful technology. We can put it on a platform in the cloud and be able to innovate at a much more rapid pace. The other piece we said is for pharmacy, in our opinion, workflow is hugely important, but everybody forgets about the backbone, which is how do you move the script from place to place? Yep. And so we also moved what was the QS1 switch, or a lot of people know it as Powerline.
Yeah.
We moved that onto the same cloud architecture. And so we now have the first cloud pharmacy switch in the market. We acquired a company called TransactRx, which had built a cloud-based medical billing. We've integrated those two. So in our view, you've got to move the whole thing to the cloud to really be able to take advantage of the tools that the new technology brings you.
And I think what we're preparing for, Bob, is the advent of how to layer information, to get information to our pharmacists faster and to our operations team faster, to make it easier to access without having to build these clunky, old-fashioned API interfaces that I lived off of back in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, where I was listening to the pharmacist saying, what can we do to improve workflow? Well, I need access to this information, or I need access to this consultant program. This is almost now you've created a system, because I understand kind of a little bit of the back-end technology. And I remember the new programming language called Ruby on Rails that came out that was real freedom driven. Yep. But when I'm thinking of bolting on now, like Legos, now you can just bolt something on in the cloud because it's not waiting for all this infrastructure, old-fashioned way that we used to program. So talk about the power of what that does for our user and reaction to our user.
I'd step back and look at, I'll start with your telecom background was interesting. That's where I started as well.
Oh.
And that discipline you learn about how to get new platforms out and the things you have to consider, because it was all about pennies and operational efficiency. That drives an engineering approach to a lot of things you do. And I use that every day. Craig and I were laughing about it coming in. That's always going to be my bend coming into a problem.
Yep.
So when Craig said, assess the platform and what do we need for, starting with long-term care, and first you need scalability. Second is you need configurability and speed to make changes. And that's in workflow, but that's in all aspects of running that pharmacy. The third thing is, how do you take that and build something that you can mobile apps natively on top of? The fourth thing I look at is sustainability of it. So if you want to make changes or you want to grow the platform, what you see in existing platforms that were built either server side or even in hosted data centers, they were built code on top of code on top of code. So the ability to go back and make changes are slower.
Yep.
And the ability to innovate is much slower. And in most cases, in our case, for the what we were replacing, it took a rewrite. And then the fifth thing you need access to that data. People want that data. So not only can we innovate and add mobile apps natively, which is pretty quick, because it's built for that, right? You have a UI that's decoupled from all the logic behind it, and we can just add capability behind it. And then people need data. So you bring that data in, and then you enable that for the user. So being in the cloud gives you that scalability, and you can go pull that data, and people can use their own data to help. And we can also consult. So the next thing you'll see coming for us is not only automation through AI. Now that you built those 5 things in the cloud, we call it the abilities in software. But then you have the ability to say, okay, take AI, predict, automate, teach people about efficiencies and how they're operating. So those are the things we're going to have. And a lot of people, the people that are doing better are using that data to say, drive my costs down, drive the speed to operation, my operations, make it more efficient. Well, you have that data to do it yourself if you want, or we can assist you. So those are the things we have in the cloud. And if you think about putting a server on your site, you have to maintain that server. You have to update it. You have ability to only do so much with data unless you start stacking servers, and that's just not sustainable. In the cloud, if you want additional capabilities or compute, it happens automatically. We build it that way where it scales out. So those are some of the things I would consider, but I'd stick with those 5 things and just know from there, the future is brighter. And we put out code every 2 weeks on a multi-tenant platform and a lot of features in that.
And long-term care is built for it, quite honestly. I mean, there's multiple segments of pharmacy that will take this platform to, but long-term care is built for it. You've got professional IT organizations that don't want any hardware.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You've got multiple facilities that you're trying to reconcile and close financial statements and multiple billing contracts, et cetera, that discrete databases are just not made to deal with. And so, and then you've got care moving outside of the traditional walls of long-term care, and you're tethered to the hardware. And so it's just tailor-made for it right now. And we're just at the early phases of it.
Yeah. Home healthcare, just have the same system sitting on your iPad because it was designed that way. I mean, actually our screens shrink and allow you to enter prescriptions or care. Care is going to matter more than anything probably out there. And that's the capability you have.
The rise of home healthcare is a huge part of community pharmacy and the fusion of long-term care pharmacy services. GeriMed, ASCP, some of the other organizations are focused specifically on how do we help community pharmacy expand their long-term care pharmacy services at the bedside at home instead of as a facility. So this cloud-based system that you could start connecting other things into, like we were talking about the packaging system that's sitting on the table, the coffee table of the patient, which is strip packages, the next dose, just bolt right into those technologies. So that excites me because it shows me that not only are you building technology for scale, but you're preparing our user to empower themselves and evolve their business and strengthen their businesses. So that's what I get excited about. Because I also, like you, Craig, I have a sweet spot. I want to see community pharmacy thrive. I don't just want to see them, survive, and I certainly don't want to see them shrink.
That's right.
And
so you've got to, I mean, our view is you've got to give them the technology platform. So if you're a community pharmacy or independent pharmacy, and you're competing against the evil empires, you don't have scale on your side, but what you do have on your side is innovation and speed. And so when I look at that, you've got to say, okay, it's going to take a CVS of the world years to make a decision, but when they make that decision, they can put billions of dollars behind it. If you want the independents to thrive, you've got to give them the tools to be nimble. That's the inherent competitive advantage of the independents.
I think of different flavors of pharmacy growing out of the original community pharmacy, and you'll take the first generation, the grandfather, and where he took the business as a community staple, the trust that the community had in that pharmacy, the apothecary style. Now, all of a sudden, the son takes over, and now we're becoming much more integrated to the community, as well as health system follow-up for ambulatory care coming out of the hospital and medication syncing. We're at the third level, guys. It's time to upgrade one more time for the grandson, this third or the granddaughter.
That's a good way to think about it.
To say it's now time to level up and bring in technology that's ready for us to expand the literal role of the pharmacist in healthcare, which is now not just centered around the prescription. It's centered around the patient
Yep.
and all of the services that remote patient monitoring and
Yeah.
and pharmacogenomics and all of this ability to latch into the patient's life so that the pharmacist gets more opportunity to service and provide, that makes absolute sense, because the physician has no time for this.
And the next generation of pharmacists, frankly, aren't going to put up with the older technology. Bob and I were alluding when we were first developing the platform. My niece is a senior pharmacy student at Duquesne, much smarter than I.
Go Duquesne.
Go Duquesne, right? And I'm a Penn Stater, but my niece is there. That's fine.
Well, Sean Naren's listening, so we have to shout out to Duquesne.
And I had her come into the office, and she was curious to see what we were doing with Access. And the next generation pharmacist, it's got to work like your phone. And she sat down, and we were going to give her some instructions. She's like, I don't know, I don't have time for that. I want to see if I can start filling scripts. In less than 5 minutes, she's filling scripts. And that's the example, the demand that the next generation should be putting on us, quite frankly.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be willing to put up with taking weeks to learn something. It should take minutes.
Yeah, I call it technical OCD, and I have it, so it's built in us. If I'm in an app and I can't get somewhere in 2 steps or less, I'm checking out and I'm gonna go somewhere else. I'll download something else off the off the internet. So that's what we built in mind, and you have to have that ability to do that. And actually, systems now are built with roles and entitlement, and then you can actually have screens tailored toward those roles, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of stuff on a page and saying, figure yourself out. And we're going to take months to do it. The other thing is you have a workforce, and it's not just COVID, that people are moving around a whole lot more. And if you're doing that, then you've got to have something where somebody's picking that up in a week, a matter of days, at worst cases, a couple weeks. Yeah, your ROI on somebody that you've invested 6 months to use an older system that's more complex, and then they're gone, is terrible. And that hurts the pharmacy. So our goal was to make something way more intuitive, way more usable, that you can actually define what people do.
Yep.
And then to your point, we'll automate more and more over time. Now, once you have a configurable system and you can add capabilities, you can actually shortcut steps by using intuitive learning or machine learning, which is AI. And you start to use that data to say, hey, look, your pharmacy, you actually should go back and talk to these techs and say, I would do it differently, or change your operation. Those are the things. We should be consultative. Once you have a system should be table stakes and scalable, and you shouldn't have to worry about where the server is. Nobody does, right? When you're working on the internet now, we're not looking for a machine under your desk, right? It's a laptop or a device.
What you're talking about, Bob, is the proactive infrastructure support organization, not the reactive.
That is absolutely true.
So the AI in the background could literally teach the user. It would be in your best interest to slightly change your workflow to this.
That's right.
Because now you're going to have you're going to get 160 more prescriptions out in a day if you do it this way.
Yeah.
Because Craig, the thing is I want to remove the pharmacist from dispensing prescriptions anyway, and get them doing much more consultation, dig down into the health of the individual and the patient, especially with the complexities that we're seeing in disease states and chronic disease states with our seniors, which is where the heart of all this is coming from long-term care. But long-term care is not our grandpa's long-term care anymore.
That's right.
It's a whole another generation of what that means.
And it's not such a bright line. How got
combo shops.
Thousands of combo shops.
That's right.
Out there. I totally agree with that. And how you provide that care. When we talk to pharmacies, if you're a retail pharmacy, we basically say, look, if you want to stay profitable over the next 10 years, you've got to diversify into 2 areas.
Yep.
You have to get into long-term care and protect yourself from DIR fees, and you have to get into clinical services. Because that's how you can differentiate yourself from the online pharmacies and the Amazons and the CVSs of the world. But it's also an important revenue and profit stream for you. And if you're not doing those 2 things, and we're not enabling it, you're not going to be a pharmacy very long.
Yeah, I get excited that our organization and network attracts some of the most innovative players. And one of the clients that we welcomed less than a year ago was Happier at Home, which is a home care agency that does all of the ancillary supportive services the house cleaning, the shopping, the
Interesting.
check-in, and now community pharmacies are bolting in
I love it.
home care organization. Well, guess what? There's still data there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's still an app that's going to be needed that's going to say, giving a shout out to Debbie over at Happier at Home. Hey, work with these
Yeah, absolutely.
these code writers, but you're going to have to say, we did bathing today. Check. The patient said on a scale from 1 to 10, their mood is an 8. You know,
Yeah.
they're feeling pretty good today. Check. I mean, there's a whole opportunity for home health care that's merged with long-term care, which is merged with the infrastructure, which is community pharmacy.
Yeah.
And that's literally where I see this going. And I'm the Bruce Nealon 2.0. A shout out to Bruce
There you
Nealon,
go.
that I want to be where he was 20 years from now, knowing that all of these pieces of the puzzle were aligning to empower pharmacists in pharmacy in America to not only lower costs, but deliver better healthcare and more reactive healthcare. Because think about it, the way that you're writing programs and the way that you're writing software is literally the way that pharmacists are now evolving. They're not acting, they don't have to go to home base. They can walk into the home with an iPad, or they can telehealth right into the living room, as long as there's an internet connection and a camera to really
Imagine.
dig down into a medical
Geofencing around that, and consultative around medication management and interactions, and totally agree. Even we were talking about telemedicine as well, or telehealth. And then, when Craig and I started this, you're absolutely right. That's the ecosystem we were looking at. So you have to have a vision for where you're going. So as we were looking at it, there were 3 pieces, right? We knew that cloud-based pharmacy management systems that were highly configurable and getting more capabilities out there quicker and much more intuitive. Second part of that was the ecosystem. We called it the exchange. How do you interact with those systems to start plugging people in? That was the second part of our vision. And then the third one was data rules, right? So we had that big database out there, and it's not a database. It's, cloud-based computing with a whole lot of data, And you take that and you use that data to automate, to provide additional capabilities, et cetera, and be consultative. And then you were talking about, like bringing in a new capability.
Yep.
That's so much easier. I mean, like when you start to look at we're certifying with EMR vendors. Well, once you've done one, you're like 80, 90% there. And things like conversions now are so much easier if you use the modern techniques and tools. So getting people live is easier too. We envision a day where one day you're going to go online and you're going to say, hey, I want to start a new pharmacy. Load your data. Here's the interfaces I want. They're already in our exchange. They've been certified. And then you start to pick, and then
It
you're
reminds
up and
me of
running.
an Apple environment. Like you guys are an iPhone and you're able to just throw the app on. And I think of the horror of, there are 3 worst things that can happen to a pharmacy by understanding selling pharmacy systems for
Mhm.
years. Number 1 is, don't change my wholesaler because it's a pain in the ass.
Mhm.
Number 2, please don't make me change my pharmacy
Right.
software. And number 3, please don't make me change my major staff. Like, I don't want to lose staff.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to train staff. I've worked in 2 of the 3. I've
Yeah.
worked in wholesale with
Yep.
the buying group environment, and I've
Mhm.
worked in technology. This is one of the scenarios that we can eliminate that pinch, that it's not so painful to wait for a year to be efficient in workflow based on the conversion of a pharmacy software system.
You can't. I also think technology is the solution to the disintermediation of healthcare, right? And so the pressures that are on pharmacy are because over the years, the regulations and the laws have permitted a greater and greater disintermediation between the patient, the physician, and the pharmacist. And the way to eliminate that, and frankly bypass the PBMs, is to get people on a modern technology network. Others to put independents and pharmacies in general on a common technology platform, not to force them to comply with how you run a business, because that's the beauty of independence, but to enable them to reach the manufacturers and
Yep.
bring those dollars directly into pharmacy. That's part of the vision that we've got to drive towards. We can't build all the technologies and platforms and still permit all of these other players to disintermediate the pharmacist. The economics just don't work.
Right. you have to have an ability to allow these pharmacies to thrive, which, you know, I'm a very positive person. I'm a glass half full
Yeah.
at all person. However, there is instances, and there's something that I do want to bring up to both of you. And I think we see this for a multitude of uncontrollables and controllables factors. And all right, we're going through a recession. We're not ignorant to that.
Mhm.
Number two, the PBMs are still in business and they're still thriving and they're still growing. So the whole mechanism of payment reform has to take place. And then number three, the age of our second generation pharmacists. Like I'm
Yeah.
blocking this into our grandfather, father, and son. So we're all working for the future third generation, the granddaughter of the original founder of the pharmacy. And I'm thinking of the third generation type minded pharmacist that is in school right now. They're P4s, they're graduating, they're going to go work in retail pharmacy to get their experience, maybe work for one of the giants just to kind of get their feet wet. But their desire is to open their own pharmacy. What are we at? 19,000 community pharmacies right now, Craig, about?
Of the traditional definition.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, I would say a lot of people say there's 60,000 pharmacies. I think there's about 80,000 pharmacies out there, 80,000 prescribing locations. What you're seeing in this country is the definition of those that can prescribe medications is changing. You know, physician practice offices that prescribe meds is the fastest growing place of prescription growth in the country right now.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so you've got 20,000, and it's been about that for a lot of years. You have basically 1,000 open and 1,000 close every year in this country. And we've got to help them.
Yep.
We've got to help them.
I'm also seeing the boutiques rise. We're seeing pharmacists build their consultancy around birth control, around HIV specialties, around fitness. If you go to Instagram and put in, you know, #pharmacist, you'll just wait till you see how many pharmacists are coming and becoming entrepreneurial, but they still need software. They still need a place to send prescriptions and understand how to work with maybe a premise-based pharmacist to do medication delivery because they're acting as the consultant. So that's kind of where I want to kind of shift this conversation next is, and I'm going to start with you, Bob, is the rise of the consultant pharmacist and your infrastructure, not just access, even though that's kind of like the star of the show right now, but it's the higher elevation and layer of your philosophies that's going to empower the consultant pharmacist that doesn't necessarily have a premise, but they do have relationships with the patients, and the patients rely on them to dig down into, let's say, even a specialty rare disease state.
I would say that the number one thing is when they talk about applications, because we learned that when we're using apps on our phone, right?
Yep.
But the truth is you're building a platform, and I'll go back to that's the three pieces. And Craig was talking about that. And that's the part that's underestimated is the value you bring and the capability you bring with that exchange to bring in, even if you're going to do veterinary, we have some that do that, you know, treating your dogs.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah, it's a huge growth area.
It is a huge growth area. It's taken off. And you look at those and go, instead of us being a prohibitor or taking a year, we just built that ecosystem and people can start to integrate and bring those in and add value because you're right. It's not just consulting, that they actually run other practices out of it, whether it's specialty, combo, whatever. Our objective is to bring all that capability in that platform where they can use it and run their business. And you can't do that if you have a hardened application. You have to have an ecosystem that allows not just integration, but the ability to visualize that and to tailor that towards your needs. So we see it growing.
Yeah. And so if you build on that a little bit, Todd, you know, consultant pharmacy, why does it have to grow? It is growing, but why do we need it to grow faster?
It's population,
and we're getting smarter about disease states, right? So
that's right.
If I'm prescribing you medications for cardiovascular disease or diabetes, we know that weight management and inflammation are core underlying cause of that. So if all I'm going to do is prescribe you your statins, I'm really not doing my job and taking as good care for you. So you need to build a system that can help link those things intelligently. The other piece is that you highlighted is the ability to dynamically change workflow becomes super important
Yep.
When you start integrating services and prescriptions,
Yeah.
I need to be able to target particular patients with data, and then I need to be able to change my workflow in my pharmacy real time. Pioneer taught us that, and we're leveraging that capability
Absolutely.
in the cloud platform. But you have to be able to change what you're doing at the point of sale. You have to be able to change what you're doing dynamically, combining point of sale with messaging, or going into the home and then messaging a family member that may be responsible for the care of that patient. And you've got to be able to do those things in the platform.
And I would add like appliances at your home to look at, heart rate and blood pressure and glucose.
You know, the Internet of Things.
And then,
And
the
wearables,
IoT.
too.
And then add to it fitness programs that are out there that traditionally were benefit managers. Now they're coming into our ecosystem as well and say, hey, look, as part of your care plan, I would suggest you do these things. You can monitor it. So you can actually incent people to behave differently as you get further outside of just what was traditional pharmacy and more consultative. So that ecosystem will grow. And
I was part of
the
a
world's
panel
flattening.
discussion that involved Kroger Health, and we were talking about the ecosystem of the pharmacist becoming a bigger player.
Absolutely.
And I started thinking of our own Giant Eagle here in Pittsburgh. Imagine that Giant Eagle Advantage card, which I use about 50% of the time because sometimes I go to a different grocer.
Yeah.
But imagine if I wanted to lower my A1C or lower swelling or something, and I was told by my pharmacist, you should be eating more XYZ, right?
Yep.
Well, when Giant Eagle starts to tie in what our consumer is buying and give them points towards more vegetables, right?
Nutrition and incentive,
or more broccoli, broccoli, or something that you can have, integrated.
Saturday Night
Now
Live.
you're combining holistic and
Yeah.
integrative health
Yep.
with pharmaceutical management and health management.
Yeah, I agree. We should be, and we will be. You'll see us offering capabilities for subscription type services for pharmacies and their patient populations to integrate health scripts and services.
Yep.
And you get your frequent flyer points, so
Frequent
to
flyer.
speak. Right.
Yeah, I'm excited where this can go, and I think what I want our listeners to understand, we are but the servants in place to be infrastructure for the evolution of pharmacists. It's the pharmacist that is in their first year of working at a major chain that sees major issues in workflow that we want to hear from these people. And we want to hear, how do we make things better for you to make technology? Because when I pick up my iPhone, I don't think really about anything except getting to what I need done. My scheduler, my music,
And quickly.
my bank account.
Yeah.
I just want to use it. This is what Access is sounding like to me. You're setting the pharmacist up to really just use the tool the way that they want to use the tool, not saying because I remember training programs with our system. It was a nightmare for the client to have to train an entire organization on the way that the pharmacy software wanted them to work, even though there was some customization. But then, like I said, when you started adding true workflow at the time, which was Integra's, system for DocuTrack, it really gave freedom to organizations that were doing skilled versus long-term care versus just some assisted living. Yeah. And that really opened up this. So this
Hospice.
Is like that third generation box of what we're able to
pharmacy managed systems are complex. There's a reason why there's not a lot of new ones out in the market, but the vision's got to be, I highlighted earlier that there's tons of corollaries in other industries, right? And so if you go back to enterprise resource planning systems, SAPs of the world, years ago, many moons ago, I might have actually installed one.
CRM systems,
but pharmacy systems should be a lot like QuickBooks now, right? You should just download the app,
get started,
and we should automate the ingestion of data, and you should be able to just get started. It's not quite that easy yet,
right?
But it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, it's heading there really quick.
All right, let's put our imagination hats on, because I'm a science fiction fan, a big Star Wars fan, and the world of what's fun. You know what's funny that makes you feel really old is when I watch science fiction that was everything to me, because when I was a young, Star Wars was it. The technology of today is more advanced than the technology that are in my science fiction films. And that makes me really feel old.
Yeah.
Because imagine if Luke Skywalker had an iPhone back in the day, how many lives could have been saved? How many rebels could have been saved with the GPS,
Yeah.
and everything that's available.
It is beyond it now.
But it
for
is.
sure, in a lot
But
of ways,
so let's put our hats on. I understand artificial intelligence too. We just interviewed Tom Lowry, who was a Microsoft think tank expert. I mean, he was just amazing. And he came on with Gil Bash from Fin Partners, and we talked about AI's impact of pharmacists. Where do you see the ability to take this vanilla platform and bolt in different components, but now overlay artificial intelligence and what is kind of like that next layer? Bob, I'm going to kick this one to you first.
Not a problem. What I would so our vision, and not us, but I think the industry's vision is one day you will walk up and say, hey, look, I need these things. You can even probably do it audibly, but you can do hashtag I need this. And you have an audit function because there's always a legality in that, but you should start to predict and say, here's what you should do next. And that should be a 2 or 3 step process as opposed to running a true pharmacy. The pharmacy management system should be working behind the scenes, but the ability to use those things should be 1 or 2 steps. And it's basically saying, hey, I've seen you before. The other thing is your records should follow you, right? So the ability to say, hey,
Instead
you've done this before.
Fill out those forms that drive you crazy.
So it should be, hey, look, we've seen this. Have you been taking your medicine? If not, here's what you need to do. So I think it's going to be more consultative based on that data and the ability to get other services as well. And it's not keystroking anymore. I think you're going to start seeing, actually, when you look at AI, it's actually for voice systems as much as anything where it started. So I think taking that and talking to it and saying, hey, this is what I need is probably going to be the future. That's where younger people go. They want less. It's mouse, touch, talk. They're not going to want to learn the 50 steps of getting through a system. They'd rather understand what's going on behind the scenes as opposed to stroking. Go ahead.
I think AI is going to change just about every element of pharmacy.
Yeah.
I think it's changed just about every element of pharmacy, and I think it's going to change just about every element of our business over time. And I think time's going to be measured in months on this one. It will. A couple quick examples. It should dramatically automate medication therapy management reviews. As an example, AI should also be guiding the pharmacist on where those therapy management reviews are most effective, and should be ingesting all of the millions and millions of medication therapy management reviews that have been done in this country, and figuring out which ones need to continue to happen, which ones should be automated outside of a pharmacist, and which ones should be done because they're so critical to the human and human contact that the pharmacist needs to do them. And I think AI is going to, as one example, revolutionize all of that. A key to anything we do with AI is you've got to be able to aggregate the data to make it intelligent. And to the extent that all your data is residing on individual servers, you're going to have one heck of a hard time doing it. So core to AI being brilliant is going to be the aggregation and analysis of the data, because you got to train it to be smart at something, right? It's going to dramatically change the way we develop technology. It's going to make it, I don't know, pick your number, 80% faster. I don't know what it is. I was playing around on chat. I was telling Bob I was playing around in Chat GPT the other day, and no secret, I'm not the technology guy in the room. So I don't write a lot of lines of code. And I said, hey, I want you to write me an inventory module for a retail pharmacy and Python linking to a Mongo database. Four pages of code come spitting out at me. Jeez. It's just frightening. To some degree, it's frightening. It's also going to revolutionize how we provide support. You were talking about proactive calling in Red Sale. One of the things we measure is, percentage of time our support employees are able to proactively call. We make sure there's enough time that they're proactively calling. They're seeing things in the system. Man, that should be all automated.
We actually had the discussion coming in. There's like 5 areas. There's automation for support external. How do you get help? There's automation internal of how do you help people? There's coding. There's QA. There's security. I mean, there's even like e-prescribing. Can you imagine the day where all you do is an audit and you say, hey, I approve. I've looked at it. Here's what the data is telling me. The other thing is when you're looking at pharmacies, I mean, they live and die by being efficient, right? The ability to cost management. Software should be telling you how to do that, not you having to force the issue by getting data, doing, and it's also, it's not proactive, it's reactive. That should be a proactive step in your workflow. You were talking about workflow earlier.
Yep.
Your decisions should be guided by how do you do what's best for the prescriber, also for the pharmacist. And we're just getting to that point where we're better at that, as opposed to the ones that survive and do better are the ones that are actually have discipline around that. Our software and our data should be telling you how to do that. And that's where we see it going. And we're quickly driving toward that. But the first thing you have to have is a platform that allows you to do that.
Right.
And then unless you're on modern technology, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to be able to hit and miss and dabble.
Where we, when I was part of the Trellis RX organization, we built our own specialty in chronic disease management platform, because all the systems that were out there at the time, the workflow is organized around the pill. And then especially in chronic disease management, it's got to be organized, and the decision support's got to be organized around the patient journey of the disease state, right? Whether it be cancer or rheumatoid diseases, or pick your disease state. And all the things, I always think back, all the things that we built the intelligence for decision support in for our pharmacists, all of that should be automated. If you really want to make it right, and if there's anybody listening that owns a large EHR, the right thing to do is integrate pharmacy data with EHR data.
Exactly.
And if you really want to manage a disease state with AI, that's what you've got to integrate from a data set standpoint.
So point of care testing is going to become a huge part
Absolutely.
of the future of community pharmacy.
Yeah.
And shout out to Dr. Kristen Talent, who runs POC Talk. It's all about the evolution of point of care testing. That data has to be shared with the pharmacy management system and access to it relevant to the exact NDC that is now tied into the follow-up to the test, A, or actually B. A is sharing it with the physician at the EHR level, which is where access could come in as
Absolutely.
the baton holder. So now baton, here's the baton for the physician, here's the one for the pharmacist.
Yep.
And now when the physician responds and they're like, this is great, thank you. Or they'll say, hey, wait, let's add this vitamin B12 or whatever. Like, it's literally going to be bi-directional, so it can flow back and forth.
We would argue we're building the largest network of pharmacies on a cloud-based data network, that if there's an EHR or lab platform out there, we're the easiest point of integration. And the first groups to figure this out are going to solve an immense amount of disease problems in this country and make pharmacy's job a lot more important. And I think if you can integrate EHR, lab, and pharmacy, and there's no good reason not to right now, and I'll put our hands up and say we're happy to lead the way with folks. But you've got to get the tools modern to be able to do it.
I agree. The other thing you can do is, like, we have existing platforms out there. Craig talked about that network, the exchange and the data. We built that where even our existing platforms now leverage that, and you have a configurable workflow like in the Pioneer platform. You have much more capability now because of that, and we're able to provide services. So that modernization doesn't have to be in whole, but it certainly you need to start that evolution, and we think we've done it appropriately. And how do you interact with us? How do you get that data, and how do you start making better decisions?
All right, so we have pharmacists, pharmacy owners that are listening in, and they want to learn more. They want to kind of reach out to you guys. What is the website that we're going to? Because it's evolved over there. It's certainly not Red Cell Technologies. It's probably Access, or is it Integra?
You can get Red Cell Technologies is the parent brand, and you can access Red Cell Technologies and get to see Access.
Access is the platform that you'll hear as a pharmacy management system. And then the rest is behind the scenes. That's the way we manage that network.
Is anyone from Red Cell going to the Assembia event that's coming up?
Yeah, we will have a group there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to get a quote from you guys, because we'll be covering it as media and press. So I'd love to talk to you about specialty pharmacy. I think that's a whole nother podcast.
That is a whole nother podcast. That's an important thing for the independents as well.
Absolutely. Having a tie into it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of threads there.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you. How much of an honor that this is to talk with veterans that I can talk with on all levels, and you can eclipse my knowledge of where I started in 2004. not to make you guys sound older than me, but I'm glad that I'm the
Definitely.
youngest guy in the room today instead of being I'm usually the oldest now working with these
yeah,
pharmacy
well,
students.
that was a great way to end it.
Yeah.
Craig and
No.
I didn't get our reading glasses out, but they're coming. So.
You know, to give you a plug in all sincerity, I think what you've done with the Pharmacy Podcast Network is incredibly important to the industry, and we're thrilled to be a little small part of it, and congratulate you on a
Thank you.
great job.
Thank you. I take this to heart. I believe in the pharmacists. I believe in what we're able to do, and I have kind of a interesting starting point in my career that was in technology and was in pharmacy software. So I understand it enough to really see the domino effect.
Mhm.
And so it gets me excited when I see the ability to fold in Alexa and Amazon
Yep.
and the community pharmacy and home care and technology and testing. There is a blood testing organization that's going to be entering community pharmacy soon called Babson Diagnostics. They're going to be able to give all of the blood testing information back to the EHR, and they're waiting for a pharmacy management system to kind of say, well, where do we push this data? And therein lies, an ability to bolt into.
Craig, imagine
what access
genetics
is.
tied into our platform.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, this is good. Craig, Bob,
Oh,
I
thank
thank you both for being here. And
It's an
I
honor.
want to give a shout out to our pharmacist and to our pharmacy technicians.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you. We do this for you. So reach out to this organization as well as Bob and Craig. Look for them on LinkedIn if you're not LinkedIn, and you can find us everywhere at Pharmacy Podcast. But that was This Week in Pharmacy with the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Thank you. Hey, it's nice to do multiple segments, and it's fun because we have had an extended show. This is different for This Week in Pharmacy listeners. So this is our second half of the show of today's This Week in Pharmacy. And we're starting off talking about tomorrow's Saturday. So I have a long week. I have to work tomorrow. So I'll be running a virtual conference, which I'm really excited about. Which is called Total Pharmacy. And Total Pharmacy is part of Drug Topics Publications, the big magazine out of Drug Topics. Pharmacy Podcast Network is very proud to be working with Drug Topics on the Total Pharmacy Summit. It's going to start tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And we're going to have a multitude of different speakers. And we want to give a shout out to all of the sponsors that have come together to sponsor this event. And it's great virtual education for you if you want to understand where is community pharmacy going, independent community pharmacy going, and how important it is to thrive as a community pharmacy because the impact that you have. Let's also talk about where we're going to be headed this May 1st through 5th. Pharmacy Podcast Network will be a press and media partner of Access 2023, all focused on specialty pharmacy. The Assembia team are an amazing group, and we like being there. We've gone to that show so many different times, and we do excellent work there to cover the show, so you'll have post-conference opportunity to listen in and know what's going on in specialty pharmacy. Hey, I have a special guest in our studio right now, which is exciting for me. Fayette County is my home county. I grew up in Butler, Pennsylvania, Butler County, but I moved down in Fayette County in 2012. And Scott was not commissioner at that time, but he became commissioner of our county 2 years ago, right?
2019.
2019.
Yes.
So this is Scott Dunn. You are our favorite Fayette County commissioner, one of three. And I'm thrilled to have you here in the studio.
And I'm thrilled to be here. It's kind of cool. And, we met probably 2019 when I was first running, and you've come a long way. I want to congratulate you.
Yeah, that's fun. I think the first time that we met, I had you to the original studios.
Right.
And we had you, I wanted to promote you because I love the thought of freshness and new ideas coming into communities. And at the time I was just like, hey, I was new to the community and still new to the community, really. And I've only been there since, like I said, 7 years. And I thought, if it were time for some new ideas in the county leadership, I was like, that's the reason I voted for you. It wasn't even it's not even a party thing to me. It's really just, hey, I want Fayette County I want it to grow. And
Right.
at that time, I was guilty of not really being part of the community like I should have been. And it was William James who started Team Humanity here in Brownsville
Mhm.
that kind of lit a fire in me.
Right.
It was like, I have to get involved somehow. And even though this publication is really it's a national publication really for the pharmacy industry, my home is Fayette County. So every time I get an opportunity to have someone local come in and speak to us about whatever subject it is, and we'll get to the subject, that's important. So tell our listeners who might not be watching live, tell them about yourself and how you became a commissioner.
So I am a lifelong Fayette County resident. I don't want to tell you how old I am, but you're still the youngest guy in the room. So listen, I growing up, I ended up owning a borough council president in my little town, and I just wanted to make an impact in my community. The population of 1,000, and we had a bad reputation, and we tried to move ourselves along and become a better community. And I did it strictly out of selfish reasons. I wanted a better place for my kids to grow up. So that was kind of how it started. Uh, about 8 years in, we were making deals and doing things, and I had about $1 million worth of projects
Holy
in
cow.
the hopper, and the and the borough match was only about $30,000. And so I kept trying to like make these deals and make deals and make deals. And then I actually it was kind of funny. One of my friends saw me speak somewhere, and they said you should run for commissioner. And it became kind of a joke at work because I said, hey, if you don't treat me right, I'm going to run for commissioner. And then it took me about 10 minutes to tell the guy, hey, I'm actually going to run for commissioner. And the reason is the same. And I want to build my community. I just want to change my community from my little hometown to do it countywide. And I thought, hey, if I can do these things in my town at 5 to 10 hours a week, that was all I was putting into it. And now I can be full time and kind of do the same things I was doing there, and promote my county and build my county back. And
Right.
We've had a tough time. Fayette County has seen over the last 50 years the loss of the steel industry, the coal industry. We have had a severe population loss over that time, and it's time for us to build ourselves back.
Right.
And that didn't start yesterday, and it's not going to end tomorrow. But I have this philosophy that if you don't take that first step, your journey never starts.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing right now. And the thing about government takes a long time. If I apply for a grant today, I'm going to get funded 3 years from now. And so, but you have to have that vision of here's what I want to do 3 years from now, and start getting that money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The older I got, I think it was maybe mid 30s, politics started becoming demystified to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got into pharmacy, it accelerated because there's so much politics in the pharmaceutical industry. And I could quickly pick up, based on track record, people who were in it really for the good of the position. And they became almost servant leadership based. And there's a book out there called The Servant Leader. And it's the whole philosophy that you're going to use your mind, your resources, your talents. In your case, you knew how to make deals, you know how to talk business, and you're going to turn that in towards the community that you want to serve in order to help it grow. So that was demystification number one for me. Number two was realizing that there's nothing wrong with individuals who bring massive amounts of opportunity, growth, or even money to a community. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that individual thriving because of that influx of opportunity and business and money, as long as it's transparent, right?
Right.
So meaning if, and I'll give a shout out to Mike Walters, just for you listeners out there. Mike Walters is my landlord, and we rent our studio space on top of his sandwich shop. And I like that because I get coffee and danishes and salads and stuff. But Mike and his wife are entrepreneurial, and Mike has a construction business. And Mike ran and won city council. He sits on city council of Brownsville.
Right.
And Brownsville, interestingly enough, is just like Fayette County. It's one of the communities that's in that rocket ship growth. It's starting to really change trajectory.
Absolutely.
Like we're starting to, when I moved here in 2012, I'll be up front with the listeners, I was not impressed. Like the downtown Brownsville was very sorry, and it was run down. But now it's 2023. This place is gorgeous. The downtown is completely renovated. So go back to Mike. Mike has this background in construction, right? And he knows how to get stuff done. Now he's part of the council, and things are accelerating because of his. Now I'm not saying it's all him. It's not. It's a combining of people, because you're one of 3 commissioners. You can't do you can do some things yourself, but you really can't make things work unless you plug into people who really want to get stuff done.
Right. So the way I look at it as a commissioner, I'm on a board of 3. If I am spending any county money, if I'm spending any county property or anything that is specifically related to the Fayette County government, I need a second vote. But I can go help Mike. I can go help Will James.
Right.
I can go help whoever is reaching out to me and help them outside of my administrative role as the Fayette County Commissioner. That's the fun part, where I get to go out and help people.
Yep.
And it's that background, that deal making. I always say the root of the word politics is people. And it's about making relationships with people. So now, I'm 3+ years in of being commissioner. I always say I have people for that, and so I'm always calling somebody up, where I get a call from somebody, I need this, here's who you call, and so I connect a lot of dots as a politician.
I want to give a shout out to your friend, pharmacy owner right here in Fayette County, Walter Liza. Am I saying his last name right?
Walter Litza.
Litza
Rhymes with pizza.
Pizza.
There you go.
There, that's a better way to know. So Walter Litza.
Sorry,
runs
Walter, if you're listening.
Apothecary shops and 2 pharmacies, right?
I believe he has 2 pharmacies.
And if he's listening, you're gonna what?
He's gonna be mad at me.
Litza rhymes with pizza.
There you go.
He has to come. Walter, if you're listening, you've got to come down to Pharmacy Podcast Network. We got to do a show about you and on you. Like I love talking to pharmacists. That's my whole life.
Yeah. so Walter and I went to high school together, and he lived about a half block from me. Yeah. Okay. So growing up.
Did you pick on him or anything?
No, he would have picked on me.
He would have picked on you. All right. So I once again moved here in 2012. I take a position at that time. I was in pharmacy technology, pharmacy software. Took a position in 2016 with an organization called New Season. But at that time, they were called Colonial Health Management Group, but they transformed into New Season. And they were a headquartered organization down in Orlando, Florida, and they managed 82 medication-assisted treatment centers throughout the country. And my job was to marry emergency room modality treatment programs between the emergency rooms and the treatment centers, and get pharmacists involved as well. And it was fun because I traveled all over the country, got to meet wonderful pharmacists, got to understand opioid use disorder and how it was impacting communities. And then I would build special programs between the center and politicians, the center and government, the center and housing, whatever it was. And I loved it. And then after I did it for about a year and a half, I looked inward to my own community. And I was like, so what's happening in Fayette County with regards to opioid use disorder? Because every community has an issue. There's no community in the entire country that doesn't have this, that impacts them. So I looked to based on other community centers, based on our other centers and other communities, I was trying to reflect and contrast and compare how were we doing compared to other counties throughout states and areas without the country. And Fayette County was doing horribly in deaths, and then keeping people in proactive treatment and transitional treatment, where you might go from like a methadone to a Vivitrol, which gives the patient more freedom. And like there was no innovation in from my perspective. Even though I had only been in it for a year and a half, I quickly recognized that. So I didn't even know who to go to in our own organization. I worked mostly with state representatives, so I went to my state representatives first. I a shout out to Pam Snyder, because that's the first person I worked off with. She's amazing, freaking amazing. And she said, you need to work with the county commissioners. And I'm like, all right. So I went to the county commissioners, and there was an experience that I had that was inconsistent among the commissioners. And I ran into political reasoning roadblocks that had nothing to do with care. It had to do with positioning and whose ground and whose territory you were in. Right. And and I quickly recognized that.
Right.
And then I was sent up to Cranberry Township to go to another organization. And I met with that CEO, and I told them about innovation, because I come across, when I get involved in something, I get all into it. I was excited to see innovation in medication assisted treatment come to Fayette County through some of the things we were doing. Long story short, I'm not with that organization anymore. I was there for about 3.5 years. And because of the lack of ability, because I was the one to convince that company to invest in Fayette County, which is embarrassing, because they put a shit, that we don't say shit, but I'm going to say it anyway. We put a shit ton of money into the center that we built. It was state of the art. It had preparation for video trainings and like doing things that Fayette County is not doing.
Right.
And that system and that location dried up because we weren't able to tap into the necessary funding that was needed to be there to grow one of those centers.
Right.
And I was ready to go to WVU and do some stuff and partner with UPMC and bring in digital therapeutic devices that would like give feedback to patients on how they're like, I wanted to go full bore. Now we go into the publication that we're into now, and I still have a heart for opioid use disorder. So the reason why I'm here with you today is two-part. Number one, I want community pharmacists to listen to today's interview and think, how do I work with my community commissioners in my own county? How do I work with my state representatives in order to, number one, bring in more resources to the community? Number two, use some of the funding that you might be able to get to do some personalized care for our patients. And I just wanted to hear from your perspective, now that you've been commissioner long enough to kind of reflect and think, give yourself kind of a report card. You don't have to, I don't want a letter grade, but I'm just saying in your mind, give yourself a report card about how we're doing as a county, and then kind of give a shout out to our pharmacists, and maybe how do we work together? Well, how do maybe I get back involved in the county? I don't know. How do we innovate Fayette County?
So first, my disclaimer is I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a medical doctor or a therapist, and I'm just a concerned citizen when it comes to and a father when it comes to drug use and things like that. So, and I'll go back to the days in Dunbar, and I recall we had a summer where we had an overdose death in my town of 1,000, and it was the junkie, and nobody cared.
Yep.
And then a week later, the softball player died. A week later, the minor league baseball player died. The week later, an engineering student died. A week later, and on. And I kept going to my friends' kids' funerals. And these were not kids on that side of the track. These weren't junkies. And our kids were dying. And so we reached out to the state and our local drug and alcohol, and we had a town hall. And you're like, okay, town hall. It was in a church, and it was standing room only.
Wow.
And it really, what dawned on me was, first off, I was there as the leader of the community, but I was also there as a parent. And I had 3 kids, 2 teenagers at the time, and one, I don't know how old my youngest son was. He would have been about 8. And I reflected as I'm 51 years old. I didn't know I was going to have to know about heroin. I didn't know, like,
Right.
if you put a stamped bag of heroin in front of me, I would have no idea what that
Yep.
looks like. So as a parent, teach me what I need to know so I keep my kids safe.
Yep.
And that way I can teach everybody else how to keep their kids safe. So that was the start of it. So I'm a big proponent of education and training, even not necessarily to people who are going to be, subject to or potentially use heroin, but their loved ones as well.
Yes.
So they can start to they can see the signs and get to them quicker. So that's been my goal all along, is to have that that education part of it. My disclaimer part is I was a truck driver and I own a trucking company, and so I don't know the business side of treatment and things like that as
Right.
well as I should. But I have people that I can rely on, and that's the Fayette County Drug and Alcohol Commission. And so we work very closely with them, and we have an overdose task force that we meet regularly and try to have events. We get the Deterra bags out to pharmacies. That's one of the things that we try to do, is have those available. I'm sure everybody listening knows what a Deterra bag is. And so those are some of the things that we try to do. And we do still have these community events where, I will speak at, we just had one in Markleysburg, Fayette County, not too long ago, where I spoke. So we continue to have these town hall type meetings to try to keep everybody educated. But along the lines of treatment, one of the things that we've done in Fayette County, we were a litigating county in the opioid settlement. So we settled for, and we're going to get about $10 million over about 18 years. So we're going to get about $500,000 a year. There's an exhibit that tells us how we can spend the money, and it's treatment and education and prevention and things like that. There's no law enforcement money available in this. That's one of the things that everybody always asks. Hey, let's get it off the streets, and then you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. But there's, I have to spend the money the way that they tell us to spend the money.
Right.
So we've worked with our Drug and Alcohol Commission to come up with what I think is a fairly unique approach. I didn't want to throw a big blanket over Fayette County and saying, hey, if you have an opioid problem, call this number. That never works. So we went and we took a targeted approach, and we know we have 3 populations that are in trouble with opioids and substance use disorder. And the first one is in our jail. We know that 90% of the people in our jail are there because of drugs. And so part of our opioid money will be used for new treatment and programming in our jail. We just spent about $45 million building a new correctional facility in Fayette County, replacing our old one, which didn't have a place, didn't have a medical wing. We now have a medical wing. We now have a programming space where we can do some of this stuff. So that's the first kind of target population that we had. The second one is the homeless population. Now, while we're semi-rural and we don't have as big a homeless population as like a San Francisco or Los Angeles, we do, though, have a homeless population. And so we're working with an organization, a nonprofit called City Mission in Uniontown, to have a shelter for them there. We will have somebody from a counselor from drug and alcohol in the shelter, and to try to recruit them to get them into treatment. So that's 2 of the target populations. The third one is kind of what I think is the most unique, and that is people who have overdosed. If you have overdosed today and you were brought back by Narcan, that evening, somebody from the EMS company and somebody from drug and alcohol go back to your house and try to get you to go into counseling.
That's great.
And so those are and we know it works. We actually had this program about 2 years ago. It lost funding. 12% of the people that they go back to meet go into counseling or go into treatment.
Mhm.
So, and you think, oh, 12%, that's not that big of a number. And then you start thinking about who you're dealing with. You're dealing with drug addicts who overdosed. 12% is actually probably a pretty good number. So, and what we can do over time is we can judge, these will become evidence-based programs where we'll be able to judge, hey, this works, this doesn't work, we need to tweak this. And what I wanted to make sure that we didn't do was every year when we get our opioid settlement money that we go, hey, what are we spending it on this year? I wanted sustainable, workable programs that will help eradicate this problem in Fayette County.
Yep. I like it. I think of SAMHSA, which is a national organization that focuses on nothing but addiction medicine and addiction support. And they, of course, probably a third of what they do is all tied back to OUD, opioid use disorder. And I think they definitely probably have data that would be able to give you metrics and the rest of the commissioners metrics and, the Fayette County, what was it called? The
drug and alcohol.
Drug and alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. So they probably are able to access data where they're like, hey, let's find a county in the United States that's the same size, the same demographic, the might maybe even got hit by the loss of the steel industry, whatever, that we can compare to see what they're doing, especially if they're having greater success with things,
Right.
in their counties, and be able to contrast and kind of think, well, what can Fayette County do now with those funds and with that grant money? I know that Narcan is now over the counter, and I'm wondering, does that help with access from your perspective?
It can, and I need to check our exhibit to see, if we're permitted to do that. The exhibit is quite thick, and written in lawyer-ese, if you will. So you kind of got to go through it and read it 2 or 3 times and really put in your brain, okay, yeah, I think we can do this. Pennsylvania also has a trust fund set up. So what you have to do is you kind of go back to the trust to say, hey, this is the program we want, like this CAST program where we go to the person who overdosed that day. We see that in section 2 under paragraph 1, because it's not 100%, in written form the way that we're looking at it. But so you got to go back and make sure to them before you spend the money. Fayette County is also this month going to sign a secondary settlement, and we will receive probably another $350,000 a year, and it'll have the same requirements. But so we will be doing what we did with these programs next year with additional programs.
That's great.
So but I do believe making sure that Narcan is available is one of the criteria.
Yep. What's the name of the community pharmacy that's out in Connellsville that's run by the wife and husband team? I'm not sure if they're both pharmacists, but it's in the shopping center on the corner across from Sheetz. I can't remember the name of that corner drugstore, but it's in Connellsville. I just can't remember.
There's a Curtis Pharmacy.
Curtis.
I don't believe that's them, but
no, I don't think it is. But maybe they're not there anymore. But or
maybe I just got in trouble.
I approached them during my time with New Season, just trying to get some ideas. How does our community pharmacies get tied into partnerships, resources, education? Because people are seeing their primary care physician 1 time to 9 times of what you're seeing your community pharmacist. And so if I come out of my my appointment with my primary care, I just went through knee surgery. Now we're of course a lot more sensitive about it, but they put you on a 7-day or 30-day supply of a pain management drug. Maybe it's an opioid. At that point, does the community pharmacist get notified to keep a little bit tighter regimen on things like text communications, phone calls, follow-ups, medication reviews? And I don't know, Fayette County, I haven't talked to many community pharmacies, shame on me, in other than Brownsville Family Pharmacy. I've talked to them every once in a while. But I really would like to know, hey, how is our community pharmacies kind of integrated into this plan? And I know that there's like drug take back days. I know that you guys do that with the DEA and things, but maybe a little bit more aggressive with therapy. I don't know if you've heard of anything or you have any people that are getting involved from the pharmacist perspective.
So my recommendation would be, we do have the overdose task force. I will reach out to them to say, hey, how do we involve pharmacists, pharmacies, into, because I've always thought, like you said, you go to the pharmacy more than you go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Even with the doTERRA bags, like when they first started, we were just handing them out at fairs and a table here and table there, and I thought, man, like every opioid or every what do they call the prescription that is illegal, not
a C2 or C1.
Yeah.
Or a
So now you're getting technical.
C, okay.
Anyway, if you hand one of those out, hand out a doTERRA bag with it, and explain to them, hey, look, don't let this sit in your medicine cabinet, because someday some kid, your kid or your grandchild, might come and take this out of the medicine cabinet.
Right.
This is how you dispose of these. When you're done, here's how you dispose of it, and give them the disposal mechanism when you're giving them the pills. So I always thought that would have been a good idea. But I don't know how to make that happen, but we can make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to hear from pharmacists. You tell me if that's a good idea.
That's right. Reach out to Scott. I'm thinking of other pharmacy owners listening in, other pharmacists listening in all across the country, where they probably, how often have they reached out to their county commissioners to really build proactive programs? Because here's the thing, I'm of the mindset, if I were a county commissioner of Fayette County, my attitude would be, I need to teach this county how to empower itself. Almost like, do I give you a fish or do I teach you to fish? And I think that you, because of your business background and the fact that you have been, this is your family, this is your life, this is what you are, a teacher of fishermen, because it's almost like, how do I get you resources to go do what you're good at? Because you think of our counselors, you think of the pharmacists, you think of the nurse practitioners, the nurses, the whole teams that surround people in addiction, and how do we accelerate that? And you're the one that is like, hey, I'm not really doing any of it, but I'm gonna bring you resources, I'm gonna bring you funding, I'm gonna bring, like,
correct. Yeah. So and that's the important part. I rely on the expertise of others when it comes to this, the business side of it, the treatment side of it. I get personally involved if it's going to be the educational side of it. I will go and tell my story. And because again, we have to have, and it's never going to go away 100%.
Right.
But we have to see it decline so that we can move forward as a community. I always tell, it affects so many other things. I mean, you're not just as a politician, when we're talking about opioid use disorder here right now, but now that affects poverty, that affects your education, that affects your the unemployment in our, how am I trying to attract a company to come here when they see that we have these problems? And so as a politician, you're trying to eradicate these problems, and it's not like you can pick off one thing at the top and say, if we take this out, all these other problems go away, because you still have poverty even without drug use. you still have poverty over here. You still have homelessness and all the social ills, and you're trying to remove that. And Fayette County is growing. And as a person, as a man, I'm just not gonna. I view Fayette County as a pyramid. I'm not just gonna polish the top of the pyramid,
Yeah.
and while the people at the base don't get to come along.
Right.
And so I want to build a bigger pyramid, and I want to build the base, and I want everybody to have the opportunities that I've had in Fayette County, to build a life. And because I know this is going out national, please come to Fayette County for a visit. We have world-class parks, bike
Nemacolin.
Trails, Nemacolin Woodlands is
Ohio Pile.
right. Falling Water.
Falling Water.
We have 2 Frank Lloyd Wright houses in our county, Falling Water and Kentuck Knob. Anything you want to do outside, golfing, skiing, whitewater rafting, hiking, biking, hunting, fishing, you can do all that in Fayette County, and
Maybe I should have a pharmacy conference up in
you,
Fayette County.
there you
somewhere.
go. We can make that happen.
See?
So, there are so many great things about Fayette County, and I get to go sell and promote all those things.
Yep.
And but at the same time, I'm not going to overlook. I always say accentuate the positive, and we're going to work on the negative. We're going to work on all these negative things down here.
Yep.
Because again, I want everybody to be able to take advantage of the growth that you're going to see.
Yeah, I think of counties that I visited in Florida, which was hit really hard by the opioid epidemic at the height of it, and that's when it was, I think, the #1 state for people crossing into the state to take their prescriptions to these rubber stamping doctors that were basically just doing it for the money, and people were driving from all over the United States or flying in or driving in or whatever. And so Florida really turned itself around. Like now they have some of the most innovative centers that I saw. I actually walked through we had 19 centers down there that half of them needed updates from a aesthetic perspective, and then the other half were nearly brand new. And the technology that they were using, the only thing that they weren't doing during my tenure there is they weren't integrating holistic medicine, and the thought that let's stop talking about just the addiction, right? And Suboxone or Vivitrol or Subutex or let's talk about the whole patient. And you and I were talking about this before we started recording. The attitude is for even Fayette Drug and Alcohol, and they may have already thought of this. How do we treat the diabetes and the hypertension and the in the psychotropic side of this? For example, they say of our patient base, back when I was in it, New Season's patient base, 60% of that patient base had another issue that was tied to behavioral health. So what was happening is it's a domino effect. I had knee surgery. My doctor put me on opioids. I got addicted and didn't even realize it. Now he took me off opioids 3 years later. I'm addicted. I can't be without it. I go find heroin or I go do something, and now my life really starts to compound with issues. But along the way, my diabetes went crazy because I was so focused on my drug addiction, or maybe therapy. Maybe they did get into therapy, but they didn't have anybody there that was working in the total person, which I think helps to dismantle stigmas about treatment, because that's one of the barriers to treatment is really, how do I make you feel? Like if I'm dealing with a heroin addiction, how does someone that knows that, even if they're a provider, even if they're a doctor or nurse, how are they treating me from an attitude perspective? That you said it before, just like me, before you and I were educated in it, we thought, oh, it's their choices. They're just druggies, or they're just it's just, they went down the wrong path. Sometimes that's not the case. I couldn't believe how many professionals came into one of our centers back in the day that were nurses, lawyers, engineers, just like you said, that were people that were everyday people that got addicted to a medication, not by let me go out and party, but they were like, I need to not have pain in my back
Mhm.
and
Right.
be able to
Right.
function. And I'm just like, so I always look for creativity and innovation in programs, but I always try to figure out, well, what's happening now so that you can either add on to it or make adjustments or make changes. So when I went through Fayette County's people, and you weren't
Mhm.
there yet,
Right.
I was not impressed with the system. I was disappointed that nobody wanted to, number one, let us into their roundtable
Mhm.
to even talk. Number two, to listen to our ideas about what we're doing in other counties and other
Right.
states that is really having a positive impact and lowering the cost of treatment. We even had metrics where we showed, because we did A, B, and C, treatment costs actually came down.
Right.
So I was disappointed, but I mean, it's changed now. I'm seeing, I don't know what's happened because I kind of
Right. What?
dislodged from it, but whatever's happening, it's been positive, like in the last 5 years.
So I know that one of the things, I have this, I called it the attack on poverty, but as part of that is, the addiction, because, again, everything touches everything. So, poverty, we're talking about education, we're talking about addiction, mental health, physical health,
Yep.
and all these things. But when we got to the addiction part, my big thing was, if you were an addict and you said, I'm ready to come in, there had to be a bed for you that day, not, hey, a week from now we'll have something open up. That day in Fayette County, there had to be a bed.
Yep.
And so we went through the metrics of how many people there are in Fayette County, on average every day, in recovery or in detox, or whatever stage they were in. So, so we actually have increased that. We actually doubled the detox beds in Fayette County. The other thing that they thought was lacking were the halfway houses, the recovery part of it.
Mhm.
And so we've increased that as well. So, I know that there was an issue with trying to get into the network, or what, um, and that's tough, because they have to figure out, okay, how many people are on average in detox every day. If you're just talking about detox, and you can't have 50 detox beds when you only have 10 people in detox, because then nobody makes any money.
Right.
And
Can't sustain people's
right.
jobs
And next thing you know, when you do need a detox bed, there's nobody to man the detox bed, because you laid everybody off. So it's a fine balance there. It's where you got to make sure that you have enough for everybody and a little bit extra because you never know, um, versus having, such an excess that, again, nobody makes any money. And,
Right.
so there's a fine line there.
Yep. And we could start dicing up levels of treatment. So the first level of treatment, and some of what you were describing, was someone who has overdosed and has almost died. They've been Narcaned, and their life is in so much disarray that it's time to go into inpatient
Mhm.
detox. And then the next phase from that is, okay, now what's the ongoing treatment, which is the outpatient. And then
Right.
maybe it's a medication assisted treatment program where they're doing counseling and medication. And then the next phase is, hey, I've been on this long enough. I'm doing really well. How do I take a how do I take a substance where I'm not having to come in every day, but now I'm taking a shot that's lasting a 30-day interval? And then, I mean, there are so many different phases of treatment that I'm sure the team, that's part of Fayette County Drug and Alcohol, understands each of those splinters, each of those
And they do.
segments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what I want to say to the listeners, the pharmacy owners, is, what can you do to reverse this process? What could you proactively do? What would you like to hear from even Walt, for example? Not to pick on Walt, but you just, since we brought him up,
Yeah.
like someone like Walt or Brownsville Family Pharmacy, what kind of information would empower the county or support the county from their expertise and their facility and their infrastructure? Because there's even the new strip packaging that you can put all of your tablet-based medications into,
Mhm.
which of course excludes methadone, because methadone is either usually a liquid and it has to be legally dispensed by the center.
Right.
But you start getting into other substances now that we don't have the X waiver, and now you don't have to. Now that the X waiver said, hey, a physician has to take an 8-hour course in order to dispense Suboxone. Now you don't need the waiver. So now, how do we take that opportunity to involve the community pharmacists to expand your services, as a
And as you're saying that, I'm sitting there thinking, all of you out there, I'd like to see you guys come back to us and say,
Yep.
hey, here's how we would like to be more involved in this as a pharmacy. Because now I'm sitting there thinking, wait, there's 2 clinics and 2 hospitals in Fayette County. There's a boatload of pharmacies. And we could expand our network through the pharmacies but I would
at
like
stages at the right
Right.
stage of
Yeah.
treatment, not the ones that are like
right.
that need to go through detox.
Right.
I'm talking about people that are the functional people that are having issues. They're the
Mhm.
ones, hey, I have a job, it's sustaining, but I know I'm addicted.
Mhm.
I need help. And I'm sure that there's a bucket of those patients who would respond better to their local community pharmacist than having to go to a center or something
Right.
like that. Because there's
Yeah.
an embarrassment side of this too. There's all like
Right.
that stigma. Like
Right.
part of treatment is saying, I don't want my public to know that I'm
Right.
I'm having this issue.
Yeah.
I'm having this disease of
Yeah.
addiction.
Yeah. So even and we recognize the stigma is part of the process, and even the homeless part of the opioid settlement that we're going to do. Previously, we had the police go out, and that's how they were transported to the homeless shelter. And we're not going to do that anymore because that was too big of a stigma and people they didn't want to get into a police car because it looked like they were getting arrested, and quite frankly, they weren't sure that they weren't getting arrested. So we're actually working with our constables who use unmarked cars and to be the transport
It's great.
for these people. So we recognize that as well. But if anybody wants to come back, through here and tell us, hey, here's how pharmacies can be a bigger part of the solution, and we will certainly look at any way to eradicate this problem.
I want to give a shout out to Mark Garofoli. Dr. Garofoli runs WVU's School of Pharmacy. He's one of their professors.
Okay.
If we have pharmacy students that are listening in, if we have our state association, the Pennsylvania Pharmacists Association that's listening in, if you want to work closer with Fayette County and we want to do something creative, I would even host something here to have pharmacists in the county come together, maybe for a strategy session. But regardless, take Commissioner Dunn up on what he's saying and reach out to him and reach out to your own county commissioner and say, hey, how do we work together? But
Mhm.
by the way, I like seeing community pharmacists grow their business. So if this is an opportunity to even grow their own business through clinical services in addiction recovery, that's a win-win.
Right. Yeah. You always look at that secondary thing. Hey, is there another win there?
Yeah.
Is there an economic development portion of this that can happen? And so, right now in the state of Pennsylvania, they have taken over years, and it's not, one party did this or one party did that, but over budgetarily over years, they have taken mental health beds out. They have taken, some of these other beds where people need these help. And so what has happened, I don't even remember what we were talking about now, but so as these things go away, and now they're looking at bringing them back.
Okay.
And so if they're going to bring them back, and it's regionally, it's not just Fayette County, it's all the counties that surround here. Let's bring it back here in Fayette County,
Right.
because we need these services. Everybody else needs these services. I want to provide these services here in Fayette County and employ our citizens and employ our people here locally. So it becomes a secondary thing where, yeah, we're going to add mental health beds, or we're going to add detox beds, or all these things, but I want to do it here so that it becomes an economic development.
Yep.
You know, and we're employing more people.
Yep. There's
So-
305,000 active pharmacists in the United States.
Mhm.
I would be curious, how many pharmacists do we have active in Fayette County? That would be a cool statistic.
I'm going to let you figure that out.
Oh, whatever.
No.
I thought I was going to tap into your metrics. I was going to cheat and get you to help. All right. Well, we have to have you back if there's ever any
Okay.
time that we could maybe even get, hey, I keep saying this, maybe we get Walt to come in with you and maybe we sit down and talk about.
Maybe I can make that happen.
That would
And
be
when
awesome.
he picked on me when I was in 10th
See?
grade, see?
This has been wonderful, Scott. Excited about the freshness that you brought
Mhm.
into the county through your leadership, and it's just good to talk to somebody in your position that gets eyes on a multitude of different things that are impacting a county, and this is just one small piece of it, but it's an important piece of it.
Right. Absolutely.
But thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Hey, we'll
Good
be
seeing
right
you.
back.
All right.